Well, welcome to Mark Asks. This is the first in an interview series where essentially I'm going to stop talking for a change and I'm going to let someone else take over. And I'm very excited to have our first guest here today. His name is HG Tudor. He classifies himself as a greater elite narcissist and is the author of many, many books, including Escape, How to Beat the Narcissist, No Contact, How to Beat the Narcissist, and Fuel, What Makes a Narcissist Function, amongst many others. He also has a blog at narcsite.com. It's called Knowing the Narcissist, which has had over 10 million hits. HG, welcome, and thank you so much for coming on the channel today.
Thank you very much, Mark. Very kind of you to invite me, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, thank you. So I was reading a bit of your background, and you were initially forced into treatment. Is that correct? It wasn't a choice for you.
In essence, that's right. I've known for a long time essentially what I am. I realised that my behaviours were different to those of other people, and through observation and through listening, I realised that I saw the world in a different way. I also recognised that there were certain ways of behaving that were particularly effective for me. And it wasn't until that I had finished university and a former girlfriend of mine who was a psychology graduate, we were no longer together, but she told me, and didn't do so in judgmental terms, that she essentially believed that I was a narcissist and a psychopath, and explained why. And I listened, and of course I rejected it. And then I went away and read about what she'd explained, and I could see that many of the things that she referred to had an applicability. So I had a label at that stage for what I essentially was. Thereafter, I continued with my life, honing my skills and going about my merry way. And as I became older, certain members of my family decided that it was time for me to see as they determined the error of my ways. And they wanted me to go into some form of treatment. And the way that was put to me was that if I didn't do it, my inheritance, which is substantial, would be withheld, and that I would be subject to certain criminal and regulatory investigations arising out of my behaviour. Now, the investigations in themselves are predicated on lies, and there is nothing for me to be concerned about in that respect. However, the time involved in such an investigation and the prying that goes with it is unwelcome. And therefore, I saw that as a consequence of ensuring I gained my inheritance and also avoiding the time constraints and unwanted prying of the investigations, I agreed that I would embark in this course of treatment. I was also somewhat intrigued because I saw it as a challenge to engage with the good doctors, as I call them, and to also learn more about myself, because it was an opportunity to talk about myself. And of course, naturally, I'm going to avail myself of such an opportunity. So I was forced, in inverted commas, if you like. There was a choice, but it wasn't necessarily an attractive one.
Okay, and so one question I had from subscribers is, this hasn't really been a treatment for you. It hasn't changed you. It's more made you aware. Is that correct?
That's correct. The fact is that with the vast majority of narcissists, and as you'll know from my work, I categorize them into lesser, mid-range, and greater, and we can revisit that later. The bulk of narcissists are lesser and mid-range, which essentially means they don't know what they are, and they'll never know what they are. Greaters know what we do and understand what we are, but will still deny it for the purposes of manipulation. You cannot, despite what anybody suggests, you cannot cure narcissism, despite what anybody thinks about it.
Wow,
okay?
That's an important line, I think, there.
Yeah, anybody that says that you can is either lying or is mistaken, and here's why. If you envisage think of a burglar trying to get into a home, and he tries to get in through the window or the door, and the sensors are alerted and the alarm goes off. So in the same way, if you tried to demonstrate to a narcissist that his behavior is manipulative, that he triangulates, that he engages in silent treatments and so forth, you are trying to point out to him that his behavior is erroneous. The narcissism is such a complete defense that it will not allow him to accept in any way that that behavior is problematic for him. So in the same way the burglar can't get in through the windows because of the sensors, you can't get a narcissist to see and accept that he engages in manipulative, unpleasant behavior. Certain narcissists will recognize that their behavior is frowned on, but they do not accept there's anything wrong with it because the narcissism will not allow them to accept that. And I'll expand on that later.
So they're aware their behaviors...
Sorry, just continuing with the analogy, however, is that if you then, coming back to the point about curing narcissism, so if that burglar decides, I can't get in because the sensors keep going off, I know, I'll wrench the burglar alarm off the wall. Well, the burglar alarm's tamper-proof, so it'll set off. So if you try to attack the narcissism head-on by either saying to a narcissist, you are a narcissist and here's why, or trying to do something to kill, if you will, in inverted commas, the narcissism, it is designed to reject it. It will not allow you in to treat it. You can't. It is so all-encompassing. It is such an ultimate defense mechanism. It's so ingrained that you can't gain a foothold. And anybody that thinks that the narcissist is making progress, that's just part of the manipulation. And so with most narcissists, they would reject going to treatment because they don't see that there's anything wrong. Some narcissists will go to treatment because it furthers their purpose. So a mid-range narcissist who's obsessed with looking like the decent person that he thinks he is will go along with it in order to dupe the victim and say, well, I went along to the therapy and the therapist said there's nothing wrong with me, which might be true because the therapist doesn't diagnose, or the narcissist lies and the victim has no way of knowing the truth of it. Or indeed, what often happens is the narcissist charms the therapist, and then the narcissist comes back to the victim and says, the therapist says there's nothing wrong with me, you're the problem. I've kept up my side of the bargain, you now need to go and get some help. And of course, the victim, plagued with doubt, will go and do that. With a greater narcissist, we know what we are, but we might engage in such treatment in inverted commas purely as an opportunity to become aware. Putting a greater narcissist into therapy is making us more dangerous.
Wow. Okay, so that's such a brilliant explanation. Wow, and it was amazing the way you're saying they actually use it and even charm, I imagine, the rather empathic, often therapists to get them on their side as well.
Well, that's right, because the difficulty is with narcissism, because it presents in different ways. You have your overtly aggressive individual. You'll have one who is aggressive but in a charming, go-getting, thrusting, achieving manner. And then you'll have others who are passive-aggressive, who play the victim, think they're the one that's being picked on, and they actually think that the true victim is the abuser. And the reason that the narcissist thinks that is that because the true victim is not doing what he wants. So from his perspective, he thinks the true victim is the troublemaker.
Right.
Many people fail to understand this, and this is a very fundamental point.
Yep.
Many victims think that narcissists sit in a hollowed-out volcano like a Bond villain, going, blah, ha, ha, how can I ruin this empath's life this week? They don't. The majority of narcissists, being lesser and mid-range, operate through instinct. But when you look at it through the lens of the victim, you think it's calculated, because you think that he must deliberately have thought what he's going to do next. No, it's instinctive, but because it's from a different perspective, it is natural and instinctive to the narcissist. Greater narcissists, we do plan, we do calculate, but I still have instinctive behaviours. But lesser and mid-range, they all have instinctive behaviours as well. But I've gained a greater awareness of who I am. I've seen, to some extent, the idea of being pro-social, whereby I was encouraged to slow down even my knee-jerk responses to see, is there a second or third way that I can achieve my aim without basically being malign towards somebody? And I'll accept that I have utilised that in instances. So I haven't changed, nor will I change, but there has been a slight modification of my behaviour. I know a huge amount about myself. I had an awareness already, and that's been layered with what the good doctors have explained to me as well, which has then enabled me to distill and provide this information to all of my readers.
Yeah, and that was one of my big questions coming in, and I think a question from the subscribers is that, if you're labeling yourself as a narcissist, isn't it somewhat of an oxymoron to be doing work helping so many people?
Well, you've got to look at it and decide why. I often get asked this question, why are you helping people? Surely that, as you say, is an oxymoron. It flies in the face of what a narcissist is. But is it? Is it? Because what do I do? I provide people with information that assists them. And what do they do in response to that? They are extremely grateful. And I get a little dollop of fuel. Now, I don't do it for the fuel because my fuel needs are met in my private life. But it entertains me to weaponize empaths. Because there are so many misunderstandings about narcissists, and there are so many gaps in the knowledge that people who purport to be experts in it and who are not.
Yeah.
And consequently, who better than a wrongdoer to show you that you're doing wrong? And I create this legacy. I have a global reach, as you indicated. I've now had over 10 million hits, so thousands of books. I've done thousands of consultations. I've answered tens of thousands of questions for people. And I do it because, one, I know what I'm talking about and I like to talk about it. I do gain some fuel from it, but that's not the primary reason that I do it. I do it because I'm creating a legacy, and I'm doing it because it enables me to be the notable expert in narcissism, because I want to be the number one resource for it. Now, if I happen to help somebody because I'm achieving my aims, it's a win-win, isn't it? So think many narcissists. Let's take, for example, Steve Jobs. He was a narcissist, no doubt about it. But what did he do? He created technology that most of us use every single day. And people would say that their lives are largely better for the provision of these products. So he did it because he wanted to be the best. He wanted to create. He wanted to achieve something that was notable and create a legacy, similar to what I want to do. Many narcissists do great things. Many politicians are narcissists, pop stars, artists, writers. Because of that drive, I accept there are many of our kind who are complete out-and-out losers and scumbags who, in a way, should be taken out the back and shot because they add nothing to the sum total of the human condition. And I know there are many victims who will say that their experience of a narcissist, that they're utter awful people. And yes, I agree, because we can be. But there are those of our kind, because of our need for validation, because of our need to succeed, because of the fact that we're not held back by remorse or guilt or worrying about people's feelings, that equips us to be the achievers. And it all depends on your point of view. If, for the sake of hurting a handful of people, joy is brought to hundreds of thousands of people through the provision of information, a utilitarian argument is to say, well, so be it. That collateral consequence is one that should be suffered because it's the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And so the fact that I assist people is not oxymoronic ultimately, because I only do it because it serves my purposes. I am not altruistic. Narcissists are not. We only do it because it benefits us in some way. And we only ever do any good act because it benefits us. So take, for example, I'm walking along and I see an old lady fall down in the street. Mm-hmm. But I've got to be somewhere. I have no emotional empathy. I have cognitive empathy. I know how to appear empathic. She falls down. I work out, because I don't feel it, I work out she's fallen down, she must be hurt. The expression on her face tells me she's hurt. That must mean she needs some help. Do I help her? Well, if I'm busy and that's going to hold me up, no, I walk past her. Indeed, I would step over her. But if I thought, well, I'm walking with my girlfriend and she'll think that I'm a wonderful man if I help this lady and pretend to care, then I'll help her. I don't do it because I feel that she should be helped. I do it because I see a benefit, that she will respond favourably to me and give me fuel. My girlfriend will respond favourably to me and give me fuel, that I can use the story of how I was so heroic and help the old lady in the street at the dinner party that I'm going to, where everybody goes, oh, well done, HG, what a great guy you are. And I sit back looking smug and nod to myself as I hold my glass of Finlandia and say, yes, I am, and drink up all of that fuel. We only do it because it benefits us.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Shall we? I wanted to ask questions. You talked about the greater, the lesser, and the mid-range, and myths about narcissism. Do you want to explain these a little more for the audience? And what are the myths about narcissism?
Certainly. I categorise narcissists into three, as you say, lesser, mid-range, and greater, and then there are subdivisions between those, so lower lesser, middle lesser, upper lesser, and so on and so forth.
Got it.
Your lesser narcissist is essentially somebody who is out and out aggressive, has a low control threshold on his ignited fury. So when he's wounded, or she is wounded, fury is ignited and you get a response. And that response is usually physical violence, sexual violence, smashing up property, verbal violence. The lesser has no insight into what he or she is. They tend to have a relatively low cognitive function. An upper lesser can be quite successful. So an upper lesser might be someone in his hometown, he has a few car lots, and he's financially successful. But he turns up at the golf club and he brags about the hole-in-one that he's got, and he doesn't notice that people roll their eyes or laugh at him behind his back. And the lesser basically is, you don't like the way I do things? Fuck you. You don't want to work for me anymore? Get the hell out of my company. They'll brawl with their friends in the bar. They have no real regard for a facade.
Okay.
Some of them are out-and-out losers. The sort of trailer trash, the wife-beating, alcoholic. These are the people that are often described as having anger management issues. They're not. They're narcissists who have ignited fury. So that's your first group. Then you have your mid-rangers. These are passive-aggressive on the whole, and they are obsessed with the facade. They are obsessed with being seen to be a good person. They often think they're empaths, and they think they're good and helpful people, and they can't understand why people don't do what they want to do. They can't understand why people try to say that they're manipulative. They operate with what's known as cold fury. So your lesser, what I described there, was heated fury. So when the mid-range narcissist is wounded, he or she operates with cold fury. So that means silent treatments, sulking, cold shouldering, walking out, all that kind of thing.
Right. Yep.
They are office politicians that gossip about people. They're the person who goes, oh, I didn't think Trevor really deserved that promotion. What do you think? They dole out the pity plays. And they will try and get other people to do their dirty work because they're basically cowards.
Okay.
They have a higher level of cognitive function. They have a greater ability to control their ignited fury than a lesser. They do not know what they are, nor will they know what they are. They do recognize that their behavior is viewed by society as an aberration. And that's why, with the lesser, he will quite readily start a fight in a bar and not give two hoots about it. The mid-ranger wouldn't do that. His wife might wound him whilst out at dinner, but he doesn't say anything there and then because he doesn't want everybody else in the dinner party to view him in a bad way. Right. So what he does is he waits, and he does it behind closed doors. And he tears a strip off her back home, or he doesn't talk to her for 2 days. And so the mid-range narcissist is always at pains to think that they are helpful and kind. But what they do is they are generally seen, perhaps by a number of people, as being a good egg. But there are a small number of people who find themselves on the receiving end of some very unpleasant and passive-aggressive behaviour. And what the mid-ranger does is, for example, the lesser, if he's having an affair, he will just go around and have that affair, and he doesn't really care if his spouse finds out because he does what he wants whenever he wants with whomsoever he chooses because of his sense of entitlement. Okay. Well, the mid-ranger operates that way, but he has enough cognitive function to think to himself, society deems infidelity as a bad thing. I'm not a bad person, so I'll hide it. So they are surreptitious about their affairs. So they scurry around. They also may appear to apologise for their behaviour, but they will never accept they're to blame. The lesser will just go, what are you crying for? I've not done anything wrong. The mid-ranger will go, I know it upsets you when I don't talk to you for a week, but if you didn't keep nagging me, I wouldn't have to have time out. And so it's not an apology. There's the blame shifting.
Yeah.
Now, so the bulk of the narcissists are lesser and mid-range, and I say there are subtleties and subdivisions between them all, but I won't go into those because it's too detailed at this juncture. With the greater narcissist, greaters are aware of what they are. They know that they're manipulative. They know that they enjoy the reaction of other people. We enjoy the game playing. It's a game to us. We know what we are, but have no reason to change because we're so effective. We're the highest achievers. We're invariably successful in whatever we do. Often the case that a greater will be wealthy, extend particular influence, and we will be able to recognise other narcissists as well. So those are the schools, as I call them, of narcissism. Now, The myths about narcissism that occur, there are a number of them. The first is, as I touched on earlier on, that narcissism can be cured. No, it can't.
Right. Yep.
Another one is that you always ought to mirror a narcissist in order to cause the narcissist to come under your control. Well, no. If you mirror us, you might wound us or issue what is known as challenge fuel, which is where you give us fuel so you don't wound us, but you do something which challenges our superiority, so we have to manipulate you. But if you mirror us, all you're going to end up doing is cause us to shift to a different manipulation and lash out at you. You will not succeed. So you might get a short-term gain. I accept that can happen. But mirroring a narcissist is never very sensible, and one ought not to do it.
By mirroring, do you mean being a bit narcissistic yourself to combat them?
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, if we are shouting at you, you decide you'll shout back at us.
Okay.
If we are engaging in gaslighting, you do it back to us. But it's a dangerous game to play.
Okay.
Then this moves into another myth. People think that you can manipulate a narcissist. You cannot. You might to a small degree, but you cannot guarantee that you can manipulate a narcissist successfully because we are the controllers. We are not the controlled. Our narcissism is inbuilt to reject any attempt. If we perceive that you're trying to manipulate us, that you're trying to control us, our instinctive response is to reject that. And therefore, you are not in a position to be able to control us or manipulate us. If we recognize that you're manipulating us, we will shift to a different manipulation. We will increase the malign nature of our manipulations against you will become more intense. You also can't guarantee an outcome from us because you do not know what else is going on in our fuel matrix. By fuel matrix, that means all of the primary, secondary, and tertiary sources that we have. So very quickly, tertiary sources are strangers and acquaintances. Secondary sources are friends, colleagues, family members, a mistress, the woman on the side, the occasional booty call. And the primary source is either a non-intimate one who's a family member that the narcissist lived with, or more usually, girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, cohab, partner. And we have various, you only have one primary source. You can have a range of secondary sources and tertiary sources. And so if you're trying to control and manipulate the narcissist, you don't know what else is going on in our fuel matrix. You don't know necessarily who's getting our favour. And so you might be busting a gut to try and influence us in a good way by giving us lots of positive comments, by making us our favourite meal, by giving us lots of sex. And it's not working. And you're thinking, but I'm doing everything. I'm being compliant. I'm being supine. I'm giving him everything that he wants. Why am I not getting my way with him? The reason is, in the fuel matrix, there's somebody else outshining you, but you don't know it.
Right. Wow. Okay.
So that's a handful of them in terms of some of the myths about our kind.
Okay, so tell me, in terms of percentages in your experience, is there a percentage breakdown between the three schools as you described? And I'm actually also curious, is there a percentage breakdown between the genders? I'm assuming it's not 100% male.
Okay. Well, first of all, dealing with the percentage breakdown, of course, there is no actual scientific survey that can assist in this regard, and therefore it's purely anecdotal based on my extensive experience of recognising my kind. I would suggest that in terms of the percentages, 5% of narcissists are greater. We're very rare.
Right.
And that probably about 35 to 40% are lesser, and then the balance of 55 to 60% thereabouts are mid-range. There are a heck of a lot more mid-range narcissists than people realise, but they're often hardest to spot.
Right. Okay.
Now, in terms of between the genders, I know that it's talked about that narcissism is primarily a male disorder, and it's somewhere in the region of 75 to 25 split in favour of males. I reject that.
Okay.
Based anecdotally, I think it's close to 50-50.
Right. Okay.
And the reason for that is this, that narcissism is primarily seen as this kind of alpha male, go-getting, aggressive, win-at-all-costs behaviour.
Got it. It's almost the Donald Trump image. I hate to bring it in, but that's kind of the image that a lot of people get when they think narcissism.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And so that's what they think, that the boasting, doesn't really care, changes his mind, says what he thinks, and bugger the consequences. Successful, winning at any costs. I'm the best at this. I'm the one who knows everything. Yep. That kind of behaviour. And, of course, that tends to be more associated with men because men are seen as generally more aggressive. However, there are plenty of female narcissists, and as I say, probably an equal number, and you get female lesser narcissists and female greater narcissists, but a lot of mid-range narcissists are female.
Right.
Okay? Sorry, a lot of female narcissists are mid-range, rather, because the passive aggressiveness that they engage in, people don't necessarily see it as narcissism, but it is. You also have an interesting adjunct to this with regard to those that are determined as suffering from borderline personality disorder. And I can see that there is an argument there to suggest that actually those who suffer from BPD are narcissists. Now, I know that if there's anybody who suffers from BPD who hears me say that, they'll immediately be aghast. And all I'm saying is there is an argument there. I'm not saying that it's definitive. So before I have crowds of borderlines with pitchforks and torches marching on Tudor towers wanting to execute me, I'll make it clear. I'm just saying that it's an argument. And so, and here's why. Those with borderline personality disorder will accept they're manipulative, and they do have narcissistic traits. I think they'd accept that. They'll argue, however, that they feel empathy. Okay?
Yeah.
Now,
yep.
You have emotional empathy and you have cognitive empathy. Now, if you've got empathy for somebody else, that means that generally you will not treat them badly. Or if you inadvertently do so, you express remorse, you correct your behaviour, and you don't do it again.
Right.
Humans are flawed, and therefore nobody's perfect. And so even in a healthy relationship, one party might behave in a way that's out of order. They realise they are, and they say,
"Sorry,
I behaved like that because I was stressed. My mother died recently," and they show genuine remorse, and the behaviour's never repeated. And that shows it was a one-off aberration. That's not a disordered individual. With an individual who's a narcissist, we repeatedly do things and either don't care or give a false apology. And then we go and do the behaviour again and again and again and again. So that's not remorse because we don't change. Similarly, borderlines know what they do in terms of their push and pull behaviour and that they lash out at individuals. And they say that they express genuine remorse. Or perhaps they do. But it could also be argued that, well, if you were genuinely remorseful about it and you know what you've done is wrong, why do you keep doing it? Why don't you correct your behaviour? Now, they may say, I can't help it. It's just the way I am.
Yeah,
well,
they would.
That's what a narcissist would say.
Right.
Okay, now, the further point is this. most borderlines are apparently female. And I have seen the argument, and again, I'm just explaining these are arguments.
Speculating, yeah.
That it is a gender bias whereby society does not want to label women who are generally seen as the more empathic, nurturing and caring as narcissists because of the stigma that's attached to it. And therefore, borderline personality disorder is, if you like, narcissist light, and it's more attributable and used for those for female narcissists, but not calling them narcissists because it's a more acceptable argument. So,
Right.
as I say, I'm not suggesting that necessarily borderline personality disorder is not a disorder in itself. All I'm saying is there's an argument there, and if one followed that argument, that would support that there are more female narcissists than you necessarily would realise.
Right. Interesting.
Okay.
An interesting discussion there.
Yeah, and then that would bring that to a closer 50-50 situation.
Right.
But I make it clear because I know the reactions of certain individuals. I just want to make it entirely clear that is an argument that's being put forward, and it's not written in stone. I put that forward to provoke debate, thought, and discussion, as opposed to saying that I'm labelling anybody.
Yeah, you're not necessarily labelling that, and it's important to clarify neither of us are doctors. Yeah. Well, certainly not of human medicine.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, how do they come to these decisions, the doctors? They spend years studying. Well, what have I done? I spent years studying my own kind. All right, I've not done it in a formal academic environment, and I've not sat examinations.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, your car has broken down. Do you go to the guy who's gone through mechanic school, or do you go to the guy who's had 20 years who never went to mechanic school, but he spent 20 years in and around cars servicing them? Both of them can help you. Both of them can understand. So the time served is just as effective, and sometimes perhaps even more effective than the wet behind the ear recent academic. And again, with those that come from the medical background, what have they done? They have decided on a set of criteria to determine certain behavioural traits, and there's large agreement with it. But you see around the edges, there's always repeated debate as to whether, for example, there are sometimes arguments that NPD should be dropped from the DSM. I know, for example, with borderline personality disorder, there's another publication that has dropped it, and certain disorders are in vogue, in inverted commas. And by the same token, I have created a lexicon whereby I have done that based upon what I see, what I recognise with regard to my kind, to be able to convey that to people so they understand it as applicable to what they've experienced. Because one of the problems with a lot of the scientific material is, and these are studies that are done, and one accepts that these are bright people that have done it in particular environments so that it's peer tested and has the validity. I'm not suggesting their work's invalid. All I'm saying is it's an alternative way of looking at it. There are various perspectives. But the way that it is framed is often quite esoteric and difficult for people to apply. So they look and they think, right, somebody said that my husband might be a narcissist, so I go and look it up. What does that mean? That he's grandiose, that he has magical thinking, that he's haughty, that he lacks empathy. What do all of those things mean? Whereas I explain to somebody, they engage in behaviour whereby you suffer silent treatments. You are treated in a manner whereby you are put on a pedestal to begin with, and that changes. And then also I distinguish the different dynamics, because it's not just the dynamic of seduce, devalue, disengage, or discard, as some people say, in Hoover, which is the traditional model between a narcissist and a romantic partner who is an intimate partner primary source, so husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend. There are different dynamics where we pick you up and put you down and pick you up and put you down and largely treat you well and give you a corrective devaluation. So what I do is, through my own extensive observation, my own awareness, and the layering of the information that I've received from the good doctors, I have created a lexicon and a way of explaining it all so that it links what the disorder is to what people experience in their day-to-day lives so they can see it more applicably. I remember in one of the very early consultations I did with a very pleasant lady from the United States who's a school psychologist, and she had read much material about narcissism, and she said, I can't, but it doesn't quite seem to be applicable to the situation. And that was because everything she was reading was geared to the traditional dynamic between narcissist and primary source. And I said to her, what your situation is, you are an intimate partner, secondary source of a shelf variety, meaning you're the girl on the side that he picks up and he puts down. He largely treats well, occasionally gives you the silent treatment. And I went through it all, and she said, at last, it makes perfect sense. Now, everything she'd been reading didn't tell her that she was with a narcissist because it didn't understand the rest of the dynamics.
Right.
My material, by explaining there are different threads and dynamics within it, caused her to realise. And she then went away and read the material, came back to me later in another conversation, I think that my mother's a narcissist. And it opened it all up for her. So there is this creation of this alternative lexicon.
So what's the best way if a subscriber wants to grab that lexicon? Is it in a certain book of yours or a download?
It's everywhere. In terms of the way that I write about it all, as you've very kindly mentioned, there's an extensive repertoire of books which are available on Amazon, all as ebooks and some of them as paperbacks. You can the blog that you've mentioned as well. You will learn more about there. There are hundreds of articles there which people can access for free. They can comment on them all, and I will, where time permits, answer questions. And they can consult with for a fee. And so all of the lexicons explained in and around all of that. And repeatedly people explain that when they've read all of that, it now makes sense because it's couched in the terms that they understand of the behaviour that's experienced by them.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay, let's talk warning signs. Let's spend a little bit of time warning signs. So I have a question from Andrea who says, I was wondering what are some of the very early behaviours you can look out for to even tell a narcissist by, say, the first or second date? Very early warning signs, and perhaps if you add on a few major warning signs that in that first month or so, women can look for in dating.
Okay. No problem. There are two things to remember with these red flags, as we call them. You as a victim will not necessarily know about some of them. Okay.
Yep.
Some of them appear, but the problem is you don't take notice of them. So here's an example. One of the warning signs is that person texts you remorselessly and rings you remorselessly. Okay.
Okay.
In a healthy interaction, if you go on a date, the next day you may say, "I enjoyed that date. Perhaps we can see one another again."
Yep. Thanks for a good time.
And the other person doesn't respond immediately because, well, it was a date, so they don't need to. And there's no urgency, so they might wait an hour, they might wait 6 hours, they might wait a day or two, and they reply and go, "Yes, I enjoyed it too. Let's go out again." And the other person comes back to them 2 hours later. "Oh, I'd like to do that. Let's go and watch 𝐸 2 on Friday."
Yep.
Okay? So they arrange that. There's a healthy interaction. There's no narcissist there. But if it was the narcissist texts and says, "That was a great date last night. I really enjoyed it. I can't believe I've met someone as wonderful as you." And that person responds, "Oh, that was very nice of you to say." And then they go, it was really, really good. I'd love to see you again. What are you doing tonight? And then if they don't get a reply, it's, "Are you there? I thought we could do this."
Right.
And it's pushing to, and it seems pleasant enough. And what happens is that the victim is susceptible to the narcissist because we sniff you out, in essence. We can sense you. And what happens is the victim has emotional thinking. And emotional thinking blinds you to the reality. So logic would say to you, this man is texting you far too much. That is unhealthy. Be very wary about proceeding. Doesn't necessarily mean he's a narcissist per se. It's an indicator. It's not determinative because you have to look at an aggregate of behaviours, Mark. But emotional thinking would say to you, "So he texts you a lot. What does that matter? He's just being nice. It shows he's keen and he's interested, isn't he? And hey, after that asshat you've been out with, isn't it nice to have a guy who takes an interest in you?" And of course the victim, that is a red flag, but they don't see it. Or sorry, they see it, but they don't pay heed to
Attention to it. Yep.
So that's one. Another is lack of punctuality.
Like inconsistency?
Well, even from the beginning, as they say, punctuality is the politeness of kings, and you should always aim to be there 5 minutes early before you're due to meet somebody, because if you're late, you're telling that person that their time and they are not important. Well, the narcissist is so caught up in themselves and what they're doing, and also, remember, feeding off their fuel matrix, that the narcissist often is so preoccupied that he or she loses track of time. And also, the sense of entitlement to do what we want whenever we want means that, so, 15 minutes late, what does that matter? And our lack of accountability means we don't see where there's a problem with that. Now, your more evolved narcissist would look to get there on time, and if was delayed, would send a message. But somebody who is tardy, somebody who doesn't turn up on time, that, again, is an indicator. Other things that you can look for is if that person, we all have a relationship history. And, of course, when you meet a new date, it crops up. So, how long have you been single? Oh, 6 months. Have you dated anybody nice? Yeah, I met a couple of people off Match.com or whatever. Yep. Hopefully not plenty of fish, because that's the stroke in the bottom of the barrel. And consequently, you talk about it in those terms, fairly vague, not because anybody's got anything to hide, but it's, yeah, that's what's happened. I've been single for 6 months. I've dated a few people. Yeah, there's a couple of people quite nice, but it didn't quite work out. And that's all you do. And you say, yeah, prior to that, I lived with somebody and it didn't work out. The narcissist would go, I split up with my girlfriend 2 weeks ago. So first of all, there's a red flag. Get going dating very quickly after the breakup, but then starts to say she's a complete fucking psycho.
Right.
And I'm warning you now, there's a chance she might turn up at this restaurant and start causing trouble. So don't worry, I'll handle it. But she's a real nut job, and that's why I had to get away. Or they'll go and say, she's divorcing me, and I tried to do everything to make that relationship work. And they go into far too much detail. You can have somebody who has had a terrible experience because they probably were ensnared by a narcissist. But a healthy person doesn't go into massive detail on the first couple of dates. They may just say, I was married, it's a difficult divorce, but, we don't need to go into that now.
Let's talk about today. Or, I've learned from it and moved on to better things now.
Yeah, exactly. And can I recommend the squid ravioli to you?
Yeah, right.
It's playful yet mysterious. So have that instead. So there's another warning sign. Also, if you ask the narcissist about his family, that he may talk in very vague terms about family members, which shows that the narcissist probably doesn't spend a lot of time with them and may well have been ostracized. So that's another red flag that occurs on a date. Also, if the narcissist is playing to the crowd, what the narcissist will often do is mildly flirt with the waiter or the waitress, or be looking around to see what else is going on. And it's because they're looking for opportunities to draw fuel from other sources. Now, they will also show off. One of the red flags, of course, is talking a lot about themselves, but that's not always the case, because a particular narcissist will allow the victim to talk, because that seems more polite, but it means that the narcissist is sucking in all this information about the victim, which can be used to continue.
Them, right? Yeah.
Also, look out for mirroring. So ordering the same food as you, suddenly having the same likes as you. But you can test it, because unless you're dealing with a skilled narcissist, that mirroring is superficial. So let's say, for example, I'm the victim and my favourite band's Depeche Mode. And so I go on a date with a narcissist and he said, what music do you like, HG? And I go, well, my favourite band are Depeche Mode. And she goes, oh, what a coincidence. They're my favourite band too. And I go, oh, really? Which is their songs is your favourite? And she says, oh, I really like Just Can't Get Enough. I remember dancing around to that and then I go, you were 4 years old when that was in the charts. So there's an inconsistency.
Right. So, okay.
Or then you say, what's the favourite album? What's the favourite album? And they can't name one. Or have you seen them live? Yeah, I saw them on the tour. Oh, when was that? Last year. They didn't tour last year. So some narcissists are skilled And with some polite yet forensic questioning, you don't have to get all interrogative.
Yeah, it's just backing up what you say.
Yeah. A skilled narcissist, of course, will have learned more about the subject, or be skillful enough to mask that superficiality by steering the conversation onto something else. For instance, would go, yeah, I really like Enjoy the Silence, but which are your favourite Depeche Mode songs? And give you the chance to talk about them and go, yeah, I really like, why do you like that Depeche Mode song? So the victim is then the one that's doing all the talking, and the narcissist has deflected away from his superficial knowledge of the subject.
Got it.
So watch out for mirroring in terms of likes, interests, dislikes,
okay,
on the date itself, mirroring in terms of food, drink. Again, all people mirror because it's a human response when you're drawn to somebody.
Rapport building, yeah.
That's right. So again, as I say with these red flags, if you notice one, don't immediately go, oh my God, narcissist alert, and run out of the restaurant.
Yeah.
You've got to look at the aggregate of the behaviour over 1 or 2 dates. Those are some of
excellent. Okay, hey, we're almost out of time here. What we're going to do is we're going to have another interview for those subscribers listening. We're going to we've talked about the first little point here, kind of the first, second date. We're going to go on and say, well, what happens in those first couple of months? We're going to have a chat about love bombing. We're going to have a chat about what to look for there. And then for those of you who are listening who may already think or be worried that you're in a relationship with a narcissist now, I'm going to talk to HG and he's going to give you some tips. He's going to give you a plan of what you can do, where to go from here, and what your options are. Before we exit today, I had a quick subscriber question from Zuzu HG, if that's all good.
Yep.
She said, this may sound silly, but I have to know. Is a narcissist able to fall in love with someone? Or does being a narcissist make you immune to love, only trying to get something out of the other person for your own benefit?
Narcissists cannot love. We do not know how to. We think we love people, and we know how to mimic it because society has created all of these trappings of love, the external manifestation of it, the romantic phrases, the gestures, the things we see in films and books, what's written in poems. So we can mimic it, and we think that we do love, but what we have is infatuation. We don't love. We're incapable of it. And neither can we learn to love either. We do not love people romantically. We do not love our family. We do not love our children. We do not love our friends. We are incapable of love.
Wow. Powerful words, HG. And I think two of the big things, you cannot cure it, and you heard what HG just said. Narcissism cannot love. So we'll wrap it there for today. HG, I just want to say a huge thank you for coming in and having a chat today. We will have the second interview with HG. We're going to go much further into the dating relationship side there. Just feel like we've just scratched the surface today. HG, if someone wants to get a little bit more material from you, there's your website, narcsite.com. They can find the blog.
Right.
Is there you've got so many books, I just looked at them and went, where does one start here? What would you recommend as a good starting book to get to know your content?
If you want to start to grow, if you suspect that you have been ensnared by a narcissist, you should start with Manipulated and the Devil's Toolkit, because that describes the behaviors that we engage in. And if you start to recognize all of those behaviors, then it's highly likely that you're ensnared by a narcissist. And then the next stage is what do you do about it? And my books, Escape, Fuel, Fury, Exorcism, No Contact, are, if you like, books which will give you understanding and also give you the inside track to help yourself understand and get away and achieve that freedom. And I offer consultations which are for a fee, whereby people can engage with me one-on-one through an audio consultation. They are hugely popular. I get some fantastic emails from people thanking me after them along the lines of basically, I'd be dead were it not for what I learned from you in a consultation, that type of thing. So it's powerful stuff. And I do that so it's bespoke to people's situations, because it's a mass, as we know, Mark, from what we just scraped the surface this evening, that it's an expansive subject And not only is there a huge amount that one can talk about in romantic relationships, but familial ones, the interaction with the narcissist and children, in the workplace, amongst friends. So there's all those different spheres, and then from the seduction, the methods of devaluation, how you deal with it, how you control your emotional thinking to get away from it, what you need to do to ensure that you get away, how to deal with hoovering, and so much. There's a massive amount of material.
Yeah.
And so when people have specific problems, they can come to me and I will address it for them. And because I'm objective and dispassionate, and to be blunt, I don't care. I don't blow smoke up your backside. I give you the answers and I'm straight talking. I'm not there to hold your hand. I'm not there to heal you. Other people do that. But what I will guarantee you is you read my work or you consult with me and I will get you away from your narcissist and I'll ensure you stay away from your narcissist, because my professional pride is such that I want people to win in that regard. If they win, I win. It goes back to why I do what I do.
There you go. If you want the honest truth, you can head to HG's website and book in a one-on-one consult with him there. HG, thank you very much for coming on the channel. If you have been listening or you have a question for HG, leave it in the comments section below. Love to hear your thoughts, comments on this video. As I say, I'll be doing more interviews in the future with HG because he provides such wonderful content. So leave your comment below, any questions below for him. Hit the big red subscribe button with the little bell. We're going to do more Mark Ask series. Let me know who you'd like me to interview as well. HG, thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you guys soon.